What the fog of alcohol is about is how you can't see certain things if you're drinking. It's a type of denial. It doesn't make any sense until you stop drinking, and then the fog dissipates and you see what other people can see. That's what's interesting. Right now I'm looking at a guy who's lying in the middle of a bridge and he's surrounded by beer cans. Now that's going to be a typical example of what I mean by the fog. He doesn't think that many people can see him, but everyone who walks past, of course, can see it, and it looks unusual. And you can probably tell that they're doing that more than once or twice. But I'm not going to deliberately film him. The fog of alcohol and how the fog of alcohol works. I like to start off by saying how long I haven't been drinking for, and that would be about 25 months now without booze. I was speaking to another guy today actually, and he's 4 months without booze. We just got talking about it, and he's 4 months not drinking, which is encouraging. Probably means he stopped drinking around Christmas time. A lot of people have a dry January and then they keep it rolling after that, which is not bad. So, the fog. It's harder to see the fog of alcohol in the city than it is in a town. And it's harder to see the fog of alcohol in a town than it is in a village. And the reason is because in a village, people tend to know more about who's there, who lives there. Eventful news in the village is less than in a town, and so more mundane things become evident in the village. As they say in a village, you know, somebody does something at one end and some people at the other end of the village are well informed, even within minutes of it happening. So it's like all the fax machines are going. And what you'll find is that if you think about where you grew up, you don't see this if you're drinking. You're in the fog. But when you stop drinking, give up, after a while you realize that alcohol and drinking alcohol can very much characterize somebody and their lives. In other words, that person, what you think of them? Oh, they were in the pub drinking all their lives. As opposed to somebody else, what do you think of them? Oh, they were the harbour master and they helped look after all the boats. Now the thing is that the drinker who was in the pub all the day could very well have been some sort of a harbour master. And when you're drinking, you don't see how people are sort of tagged by these descriptors. And they're almost like stereotyped. And especially what they drink. They can be labelled according to the labels that they're drinking from. So there's Mickey Stout and John Joe Lager and Dinny Whiskey. And the way you know this is when you stop drinking, you need to think about an area where there are people living and you know that area somewhat well. In that place that you've picked, start at one area, one end, and somehow we're going to be making our way across to the other end, like a walk. And start going through everything. Who lives there? And see what defines them, or what happened. And it's very interesting how quickly alcohol can become a defining characteristic of whoever is living there, or maybe once lived there. It's very interesting that alcohol becomes that descriptive factor in that person's life. And that's what I mean by the fog of alcohol. Well, you know it's there. And you're able to even say what it is when you give up and stop drinking and sober up a bit. So it's there. But there's a fog that doesn't let you see it quite clearly. You're looking through a glass darkly. And so, if I use my own mind to try and recall things, I know, for example, that there's one individual who's banned from every pub in the village because he talks about inappropriate things with everybody and annoys everybody, and he's banned from basically everywhere. Nobody wants anything to do with him, and I know what his job is, but I don't associate him with his job. And there's a woman who gets in such a bad way that she phones the police over some matter, and they arrive, and then she berates them. You know, she gives them a hard time. I could see a guy who wrecked his marriage, and she obviously helped wreck his marriage by ending up together in one of the apartments where people were able to look in the window and tell his wife what had happened and what they were seeing. And he'll always be associated with that. Then I move up a bit more, and there's the man with the red face. And he pretends that it's because he's been out at sea all his life. But it's not. It's a combination of high blood pressure and drink. And then you could see the fellas who like to do outdoor work, but they can't do it unless they have a can or a bottle nearby. And they're into the bottle. And then they can do the painting, you know? And there's a fair bit of that. But here's the thing. In between all of these places are those who are sober and those who can see, and they know what they're seeing, and I can see as they see because I've stopped drinking. But I know that I've got a name as well from the times that I was drinking. Fair enough, I earned it. I earned those names. And as I move along, I can see where people have ended up selling their homes so that they would have money to go drinking. That's a common one, where people get older, and as they consume more alcohol, they realize that their pension can't cover their habit. So in my first Pilling the Cat video, I explained that it's about alcohol recovery and how alcohol recovery is unabashed. And this is part of why it's unabashed, is that you're going to be talking about things that are just awful. There's no other way to describe it other than just awful things. But with the fog of alcohol, these things aren't so awful as they actually are. It's more like, these things happen, that's life, but it's not true. This is not authentic living. This is not your authentic life. And part of that authentic life is in seeing these things and acknowledging that they exist. I don't see myself as ever having been apart from these things. I was in them, I participated, I don't anymore, but I take it day by day. And I'm careful to not fall into the trap again, because as I said in other videos, when you go back after you quit and you go back, things become twice as bad as they were before. It actually doubles. So if you can stay off it the first time you quit, that difficulty level will be sort of constant. But if you go back and then you quit again, the difficulty level sort of bumps up, as well as the level of the bad experiences that you have. So I'm going to continue on my walk, and I'm going to talk more about the fog of alcohol. So I'm certainly not here to judge anyone. In fact, the opposite. You learn not to judge because of these things, because you were once there, because you were once part of it. You learn not to judge, but you're aware of them. And how, if you had a preference, I think you wouldn't want to be part of them. But you can definitely sympathize with people who are there. And drink is very much a disease. You hear it being called a disease. How is it a disease? How is it a virus? How is it contagious? Sure, it's that first sip, or you drank too much, you made the choice. I don't think that this is fair, and I don't think it's realistic either. I think people have a genetic propensity towards some of these things. But in the long term, the alcohol will, of course, dominate. Speeding in cars, absolutely crackers. Fellas just flying along the road and couldn't care. And of course, beyond a certain speed, they're out of control. And the cops are going after them, as they should be. Well, that's a good one. So that fella was speeding, and he's been caught. He's going to be caught. Of course, going that fast, I'm going to be going after him. Yay! Of course, when you're speeding that quickly, you're no longer in control. You're out of control. You're not able to stop quick enough should a kid run across the road or something. And of course, as I go for my walk around the town in my head, I can see where alcohol has definitely played its role in automobile accidents. One of the most traumatic experiences in my life happened to be in a car where somebody was drinking and driving like a maniac. And it was a white knuckle ride, and I thought I was going to die. I definitely have a touch of PTSD from that. And PTSD will be a topic of another video. Automobile and alcohol related incidents, there are plenty. There's been cars turned over, like upside down or on their side, that weren't going particularly fast, just fast enough to go on to something that lifted the car one way, and next thing you know, the occupants, including kids in the back, are on their side or upside down. And of course that person will forever be associated with that incident. So mothers can do all sorts of stunts with alcohol and cars. Another one would be child dumping. So what's that? It's where somebody gets to know somebody else who has kids, and what they do is they say, can I leave my kids with your kids to play for a while, and I have to go to town for a little bit, I'll be back in an hour or two. Of course, they don't show up until the evening, and they're half pissed. People who want to be drinking with their spouses even, or just going out and having a good time, instead of paying for a babysitter, will dump their kids with somebody else. And they'll do it once, twice, and then they'll keep doing it. They'll keep doing it until the person says that, you know, they're too busy, they can't do it anymore. They find an excuse not to be taking the kids all the time. And the thing is that the person will then just move on to the next. And you see somebody who has kids and is busy enough, being overwhelmed with even more kids to manage because of people who do this type of dumping. You end up feeling like a cuckoo raising other people's kids because they want a party. Happens more often than you think. So of course those moms, they get a name for themselves, the child dumpers. And as we move further along, we come across some very, very sad cases. I know about another woman that loaded her nightgown up with rocks in the pockets and walked out to sea. So yeah, alcohol can take people in all sorts of very sad, sad ways. And of course, let us not forget that in between these places are those who don't drink, that they've realised what's going on and they see it, they talk about it among themselves, and it helps them not to drink. What's interesting about quitting drink as well is that if you do it, you can quit smoking too, kind of like at the same time. You might as well bundle your quitting into one package. But again, see a doctor before you do, because withdrawals can kill people. And it doesn't matter how much they were or weren't drinking, it affects everybody differently, and over time it changes. History is no predictor of how you will react if you quit drinking. It's definitely within 24 hours, see a doctor and talk to them about quitting if you're serious about it. So what's my next step? Here's the sad part. In everything that I've talked about so far, I haven't even covered that much ground of the place that I'm thinking about. And the thing is, when you're sober and not drunk, the fog is still there, because you know that you're going to be hitting the drink again at some stage, and so you're in denial about the influence and the impact that alcohol is truly having. And when that fog lifts, then you realize just how pervasive alcohol is as a problem in our society. Now, I do not subscribe to prohibition. God, no. And that's another topic. But all you have to do is go back to the 1920s and read about the unintended consequences of prohibition and how it fueled Al Capone, how it fuels crime. Prohibition is an evil in itself that causes many more problems than you think it would. And those unintended consequences see the crime rate spiral, and you start going into things like murders, gangland murders. So prohibition is not the way, but the way is the way I'm showing you right now, which is the way I've learned from other people in Alcoholics Anonymous. You talk about it, you acknowledge it, you keep a mental record of what's going on, and it's a day-by-day thing. When demon alcohol rears its head, you start to see it for what it is. You're able to notice it a lot quicker than before. You know the warning signs. And one of the areas where you have to be most careful, that when you're hitting a high point in your life where things are going great, the demon alcohol will show up then. It might not even be demon alcohol, but just a demon. And the demon's there to spoil that moment. The demon does it by hiding until that last moment, and then jumping out and making you do something that impacts you for the rest of your life. And a good example of that is Will Smith and the Oscar slap on Chris Rock. It was Will Smith's highlight of his career. But how many of us will remember Will Smith, the actor who was in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or Men in Black, or who played Muhammad Ali, or who was in 6 Degrees of Separation, or who was in I Am Legend, or I, Robot. All of that good work evaporates, and instead he's Will Smith, the guy who slaps comedians. When I think of the town I was walking through in my head, I haven't even covered the half of it. And this is the half that I know about. What about all the things I don't? Well, if this is what is visible when the fog is lifted, imagine what is truly visible if everything was shouted from the rooftops and made known. If it happened, it would be a shock, but no surprises to those who have come out the other side of Silent Hill and can see a bit clearly now through a glass that was once darkly, and becoming somebody who's living their authentic lives instead of a version of their lives shaped by demon drink.